There is no official guidelines which has been issued by anyone which tells you that this is the benchmark for valuations, this is Mehanga, this is Sasta, and that's what I always say. If you buy a good business at a decent price, it really doesn't matter if you're buying at a 20% premium or a 50% premium. It's all about buying good businesses, good managements, and you can't compare the global valuations with Indian valuations. I've maintained for a long time, unlike what fund managers always tell me that, oh, Nestle in India is at 55 times, Nestle global at 20 times, because India has a far more greater potential. So we'll take that conversation forward, not today from a stock market angle, but purely from a business angle. And the business angle for FMCG is that rural demand is making a comeback. Niche products are doing very well. And across the board, FMCG companies are sounding reasonably confident about revival and uptick in demand. Harish Bijur, CEO of Harish Bijur Consultants, and along with him Harsha Razdan, partner head consumer business with KPMG, joins us. Gentlemen, good morning and thank you for joining us. Harsha, let me kickstart the discussion with you. Now, the big story is that the India romance is centered around consumption, and consumer companies will do very well. But why are we getting a sense that there seems to be a sudden resurgence and revival both in urban demand and in rural demand? The commentary which we've got, Harsha, from across the board FMCG companies, from Dabur to a Nestle, different ends of the spectrum, seem to be pointing that demand is back with a bang.
So sorry. So I agree. I agree with you. In fact, there are a few data points which I agree with the fact, and a few data points which I believe are actually hinting towards the same direction as you point out. Let's look at GST. GST has stabilized over the last year. There are a few GST slab cuts which the government has put in place. Eventually, this will lead to price cuts for the consumer and will spur demand. Let's look at the rural spending and the investments that the government is doing in the rural domain. There's been an MSP declaration by the government around Kharif crops. The crops that they have targeted are about 50% of the major commodities that the common man or woman will consume. They have been and are looking to invest hugely on heart infrastructure in the rural areas. And there are companies such as NABARD who are looking at spending about 10,000 odd crores on animal husbandry and fishery. So all this will eventually lead to higher disposable income for a rural consumer and eventually spur demand. And last but not the least, we expected it to be a normal monsoon. It has by and large been a normal monsoon this year. And I guess it again talks a lot in terms of how the industry would move. Now, yes, at times people are challenging these three parameters. We're looking at crude oil prices, which could actually have a little bit of a dampening effect in terms of how FMCG demand would shape up. There could also be the case of excess water or floods. You had the Kerala case. But again, it depends on to how this would pan out. But overall, the three big parameters, GST, rural, and the third parameter would lead us to look upwards for FMCG for the near future for sure.
Harish, hi, morning. Want to get you in also on the discussion because you've recently released a very interesting communique on how mass consumption products have seen a boom in demand since post-GST, and one would have actually thought that there is going to be an aberration. Highlight some of the interesting takeaways from that report.
The fact remains, this recent study for a particular corporate, whom I can't name, we are kind of, investigating the buoyancy in the FMCG market, trying to see what is it that's creating this kind of gung-ho feel. The typical key point is that FMCG has always been a gung-ho category for India. It's either grown anywhere between 7 to 26%, depending which territory you're talking about, whether it be rural or urban. But the point is that we are a nation of 1.3 billion stomachs and bladders, which typically means to say that, that much of consumption of food and beverage. And food doesn't go out of fashion. Fortunately, all of us feel very hungry 3 times a day, minimum 3 times a day, and we have to put something into it there. But the key story that's emerging is this business of, wanting to upgrade. And that's interesting because in rural markets, which comprise 69.1% of the topography of this country in terms of population, you see this business of wanting to upgrade from the basic biscuit to the slightly higher end biscuit. So there is this feel to say that I am a Parle G user, but I need to move from a Parle G to a slightly higher end biscuit. And most of the time, that's where the portfolio strategies of companies like Parle Biscuits is working. Same thing goes for Britannia. You're really seeing, there is a skew between the basic biscuit and the premium biscuit. And premiumization has paid good results and good dividends for a company like Britannia. So when you look at valuations of these companies, I don't think we should get very excited at high numbers vis-a-vis global numbers. A 69 valuation is still an undervaluation for this country. I think, looking at an 80 number for a company like Britannia, or looking at even unlisted companies growing at phenomenal paces, I mean, nothing new out here. The key story is the upgrade want. The people are wanting to move from the need category in FMCG to the want category in FMCG. In rural and in urban, from the want category of FMCG, people are moving to the desire category in FMCG in urban.
Right. And so as that transition happens, Harsha, do you think that it would just lead to a massive compounding effect for a lot of consumer companies that are building their distribution networks through the semi-urban, rural areas? And so, what the market is pricing in, and we are talking more from a stock market perspective, is that tremendous inflection point of growth that will come through from that side of the market, or that segment of penetration.
So if you look at the Indian demographics, our median age still remains at about 27 or 28, which is much lesser than any of the comparable countries. Other Asian countries in early 30s, China is 37. Our population is still growing at 1.2% for the next 30-40 years. We also believe that the working population is about 50% overall population, and that remains so for the next 30-40 years. So very clearly, if you have the three parameters, I would say GST, rural, and the monsoon sort of kicking in again and again, I think there's no reason for the consumer uplift in demand to continue over the longer term.
Harish, let me just take that point forward, and you brilliantly articulated that there seems to be a uptick in the way how Indians would be consuming food or perhaps consumer staple items now. So when you say that in the rural, in the urban space, from want to desire, that migration is happening, which are the brands you think are fit to take advantage of this change in pattern cycle?
Typically anything that you eat and drink in urban markets, I think that's a fantastic bet. This can't go wrong because once you get acclimatized, used to portfolio shift within the brand portfolio, take the basic item called a biscuit. I mean, moment you have moved out of a Parle G or moved up from a Parle G into a Parle Platina range, which is a premium range, let's say, it simply means to say that that becomes the status point below which you don't want to come back. And so water settles at a new level, consumption settles at a new level, spend settles at a new level. So this is happening in anything that you can consume. Same thing goes for product categories, and that's why the portfolio strategies of companies is a great thing to back. To say that I am a company, I have 600 SKUs, and I think nothing can go wrong because India is so myriad. There's growth in every category. So I will have the basic biscuit, I'll have the middle end biscuit, I'll have the premium end biscuit. The same story goes for even grains today, because in urban markets, if there is a branded grain category, the dal, chini, chawal, atta, you will see a frenetic tick up which is going on in terms of growth in the grains category. The supermarket chains of this country are seeing a huge influx as of today, because there seems to be a reliability quotient coming in to say that I'd rather be there. Crazily, apart from what you eat, even detergents. But the point is, the detergent growth quotient or the upgrade quotient is about 6 on 10, but whereas the upgrade quotient on FMCG is 9 on 10, which simply means to say that it's better to back something that people are putting into their bodies into their stomachs and into their bladders, more stomach than bladder. Because again, beverage companies versus food companies, I would rather back food companies first, beverage later, because beverage becomes a kind of a lifestyle statement which is reasonably outdoor, whereas food is a statement of intent indoors, within the home, and it's about aspiring for that upgrade.
Yeah, indeed. Harsha, I'm intrigued to know that within FMCG as well, where is it that you see maximum growth coming in? Harish was just talking about this entire urban and rural consumption trend. Where is it that you see maximum scalability? Is it going to be in dairy? Is it going to be in bakery? Is it going to be the snack market? Or would it be the aerated beverages which are going to see that maximum play?
I think it's going to be food overall, which would lead the pack. Does not mean that categories such as personal care or other categories such as aerated beverages will not kick in. But food, given the fact that we have such varied tastes within the country, and given the fact that this is an under-penetrated category for branded products, has only one way to go, which is up, and the distance between other categories and foods will continue to be maintained or strengthened in favor of food.
Harsha, when you say food, can you be slightly more specific here? Because as percentage of the total per capita spend what Indians currently have, after rent, the second category is still food. So this category may not see an expansion in terms of budget, but in terms of profile, Harsha, which are the companies which to your mind are the best suited categories when it comes to food? And when it comes to the American food companies, which are giants in their own size, they've largely become big in packaged food. But now there seems to be this entire health rhetoric against sugar drinks. There is a health warning if you're buying packaged foods, if you're buying salted pickles. So what has happened in America a couple of years ago did not come with a lot of health warning, but in today's time, Harsha, when there's WhatsApp, social media, do you think what Americans have created in their food market in last 25 years, Indians may not be able to replicate that?
So I think from the Indian market perspective, very clearly, non-Indian companies, which have been American or European, will have to customize to the needs of the Indian consumer. You would see a lot of Indian startups, smaller companies also sort of fruiting up very rapidly in the food space, because there's a huge amount of unmet need which is being serviced by these companies. I think we also talked about the advent of modern trade. Now, modern trade has given a huge slew of SKUs, a different quality experience of shopping, which is aiding all this expansion in the food. E-commerce has helped it even more. It expanded the SKUs beyond an unimaginable period. There are companies like Grofers and others which are looking at need states of convenience which never was looked at in the past. So very clearly, I think this sector is bound to grow very clearly. Food, especially Indian food companies, will continue to grow better. The MNCs will have to play a role in terms of how they customize, how they adapt to the Indian tastes and needs and price points if they want to make it big in the space.
Right. Gentlemen, Harish as well as Harsha, thanks very much for taking out the time to speak with us this morning and share with us your thoughts on how you see the road ahead for the biggest story that comes from the Indian market, which is the strong consumption play.